I'm so glad you are back for another episode of the Fabienne Show. I am introducing you today to my good friend, Jen Hill. Jen and I had an immediate connection when we met in Portugal. And as you'll hear from the beginning of this episode, we totally bypassed the how are you, who are you, and went straight into creating a deep connection. And she and I, since we met about a year and a half ago, have decided to meet every month for a 1 hour chat just to serve each other, give resources to each other, be there for each other. And it's just incredibly valuable to have people in our life that are super connectors, people we benefit from and can benefit also. And I decided to interview Jen and bring her to you so that you can receive some of her gems in the form of an episode of this podcast. And what struck me most from our moving chat, our moving conversation, is how everything can be solved with a connection. Perhaps you have a challenge that you're facing. You need a resource. You have a client that you're looking for or a team member you'd like to hire. Perhaps you just feel alone and you wish you had some solutions. And what I have learned in my own life, I'm a connector myself. I'm a super connector. I just happen to know a lot of people, and you probably do too. What I've learned is that everything we seek starts with the right community. When we have the right community, we have access to answers. And we women are built for community, literally. This is how we differ from the masculine in a lot of ways, because the masculine is linear and solo, as I've learned in studying the masculine and the feminine energies. And too often, ambitious women like you and I, we are wanting to grow our business. Maybe you're at this cusp of wanting to grow your business to multiple 6 or 7 figures with more freedom, but you're stuck in isolation. You are trying to get clarity on your own. You're trying to find somebody to help you in your business, maybe a team member, or find a different way to do it. And trying to figure it out all alone is probably not working. And so I invite you to really listen to what Jen has to share about how to craft connections, how to use her steps to get that guidance, get that support in your own life with a community to support you, the right people in your life to guide you, to elevate you. Because when you do, stagnation leaves and you start seeing some momentum. So if you are feeling isolated, just know that it doesn't have to be this way. We are unpacking what it means to create more connections in our life, in our business, in our personal life, for our well-being. What I know for sure is that when you are surrounded by people who truly see you and truly believe in your potential, your goals feel closer, easier, and more attainable. I hope you love this conversation with Jen. Here you go. Welcome back to another episode of The Fabienne Show. I am so delighted, truly delighted to introduce you to my friend Jen Hill. Jen, I think you and I met about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago in Portugal, where you live. And we had an immediate connection. And we started talking about once a month. I think it's about that. Maybe we have missed a month or two in the last year and a half, just really sharing ideas. And what I noticed about you, and I said this before we pressed record today, is I am in deep awe and admiration of who you are as a woman in the world. And your heart is so big. And you are the answer to every question or every problem is, oh, I know somebody for you. And I'm a connector myself, but I'm not sure I've ever met somebody as truly aligned with their purpose in connecting others as you are. So I just want to welcome you. And would you be willing to share, well, of course, who you are, but even before that, what is the intention that you just set? You shared with me before we hit record. Do you mind sharing that with everybody?
Yeah, thank you so much, Fabienne. I very fondly remember our first conversation where we deep dove into breakfast and, just talked about the meaning of life and spirituality. Oftentimes you meet somebody and you might talk about where are you from and what do you do? And I think you and I just dove right into consciousness, the meaning of life in the universe. And so that
We
was
totally bypassed all the chit chat.
And that's honestly how I am. And that's what ties into what I was setting as an intention for this year, which is connection, contribution, and joyful abundance, which for me go hand in hand. What I've been told intuitively, at least, to do this year is to help every person that I come in contact with to super connect to themselves, to one another, and to their purpose. And really, if I could look back at the end of 2025 on December 31st of 2025, and know that I did that I added some little bit of value for every person I met in one or all three of those areas, and it would have been a year worth living for me. And every day I get up, and that's essentially what I say is I just spend about 2 hours a day in meditation, reflection, among other things. And I just say, universe, please let me be of service. Put me where you need me most. Let me listen deeply for what's going to be most meaningful, whether it's to your audience today, Fabienne, or to new friends or people I meet. As I just posted an article last month, I said that every day for me getting on my calendar is like Christmas because I'm opening up the gifts of all the miraculous human beings, yourself included, who I get to meet every year. And that's really what I do. Is I built and sold a company in the legal recruiting space. We exited that in 2018. And after we sold that company, my business coach, Julian Adler, who helped me sell that first company, said, Jen, you're really good at connecting people. Why don't we create an algorithm that mirrors your intuition for matching people? I said, what? I didn't come from technology. I came from recruiting. I was like, can we even do that? And Julian came from behavioral sciences and software. And he said, yes. And so that's how we came to develop App, OptiMatch. And that's what I've made my life's work for the last 4 years.
Amazing. So take us back, just like, how does one become this super connecting super champion? Like, did you grow up with parents who were super connectors? Is it innate? And can you share with us, before we talk more about the app later on our call, just like share with us what comes naturally to you, how you do it, just so, because every woman here, I think every person on earth can really supercharge their life by surrounding themselves with the right people. And somehow it comes naturally to you. So first, let's talk about that.
It's funny. I've never been asked that before, Fabienne, if it's innate or not. I think I've always had an innate ability or desire, even more so than an ability, to want to bring people together, even when I felt like I didn't belong. I was actually the antithesis of a connector when I was little and younger and in my teenage years, because I never felt like I belonged. I was actually just doing a post about this on LinkedIn the other day. Of course, the movie Wicked just came out, and for anybody who's seen the theatrical presentation of it or watched the recent movie, it follows the story of the Wicked Witch of the West before she became this Wicked Witch. And I deeply resonated with that because there is another reality, Fabienne, and all your listeners and wonderful women out there, where I could have just as easily been the Wicked Witch of the West, because I tried so hard to fit in and I couldn't figure out people. And so I tried pleasing and I tried doing all the things that I thought somebody was supposed to do to be a good person, to be liked. And no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't connect to myself or others. So when people ask me about this gift of connecting and super connecting, it was out of survival, Fabienne. I truly believe that any of us can cultivate and grow this skill. I didn't even know what a super connector was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I was part of a mastermind called Baby Bathwater, and I showed up on this island and I was so nervous. So to give context, if you put me in a group, like when you and I and our mutual friends, when we go out for dinner, I feel at ease. Like if I know you personally, it's great. Awesome. But when you put me in a group of 200 people I don't know, I'm going to go hide. Literally, I went and hid on the island at various points, and it was only because one of our mutual friends, Maya, was there that I even had agreed to go. And a gentleman named Charles Bird and I connected on the island. So if you sit down with me one on one, I love, Fabienne, to find out what matters to people. That's kind of how my super connection spidey sense works. When people start sharing their hopes, dreams, wishes, deepest desires, it's like lightning strikes me with inspiration of who to connect people to. And somebody was just asking me the other day, how can I cultivate that skill? How can I learn that? And something Charles taught me that made sense that I was doing intuitively, but I never thought to teach others, is he said, Jen, you know what I do? And Charles is one of the best super connectors I've ever met. I said, what? He said, every time I think of somebody, it's almost like somebody's ringing you in your mind. Like I just thought of Fabienne, or I just thought of Maya. How often do any of us actually ping that person and say, oh, Fabienne, I was just thinking I was out in Sintra and recalling that beautiful breakfast we had. And I think that's what super connectors do very well. And you can actually be an introvert or an extrovert super connector. I was just having a debate with another super connector friend about this, is you don't have to be an extrovert. It's more about just cultivating this deep, meaningful connection with others and not trying to take energy. I think that's the thing I've found from all of the wonderful people I've come in contact with. If I'm coming to you because I want something, I want your money, your attention, your time, your energy, that's when all of us get that feeling off me and we run for the hills from one another. When I show up to a meeting, I really have no agenda other than to be of service. I just like to listen deeply for what matters to other people and ask them that, and then weave those threads together. And I'll often tell people when I first initially meet them, I'll say, what matters to you? If I could be like a fairy godmother and give you the one connection that would make the difference in the world for you, who or what would that be? Or resource. I often have a lot of resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then people will share and I'll say, listen, all I can tell you is I will hold it in my heart. I make notes. I mean, there's whole systems that I've developed around it. And I might respond to you in a month, in a year, or in 2 weeks. I never know, but I will do my darndest to keep it in mind. I even do it for friends around love. I've set up two people in, romantic relationships where they fell madly, deeply in love, two different couples. And I just hold it in my heart for people. And then it's such a joy because there's no amount of money on the planet, Fabienne, that can equal the difference we get to make in one another's lives. And that's really what I intend to bring to the world this year.
I think what I'm hearing is a few different things. It's simple but profound at the same time. One, it's about getting beyond just like the chit chat, just going straight to what is it that matters to you. And when I ask the question, if I meet somebody, I'm usually thinking like, what are you working on and how can I help? And a lot of times people are like, wait, what? You're just looking to give? And I'm like, yes. I also understand the law of reciprocity, the law of circulation in the universal principles. But this whole idea of like, let me find out first, especially because highly successful people are often sought after or called upon to provide before they are being provided to. I actually learned this from Joe Polish. I presume you know Joe Polish. He's another super connector. And he was one of the people who taught me that you go in giving, just go in to give without any thought of asking back and give big. The second thing I heard you say is this idea of just really being present to the little divine downloads that show up. Like if I think of Jen, I have this friend who just did this. I looked at my WhatsApp just before jumping on and he was like, hi, I'm thinking about you. And how many times I don't do that. Sometimes I do, I reach out, but I'm hearing as a system is that when those divine downloads come, jump on them because they are part of the connection process. And just creating these systems around it and just coming from this vibe of generosity.
Yeah, and all our needs are met. I think you nailed it, Fabienne, and I love how you encapsulated everything I just shared so eloquently. It really is. It's about being a person of sharing. I study many different spiritual disciplines, and one of my favorites that's helped me tremendously in business is Kabbalah. And one of the Kabbalist tenets is they say that there are two desires that we have in life, which conflict with each other. One is the desire to receive itself alone. So that means I want to receive $1 million so I can have $1 million and travel the world and go do all this fun stuff. The other is desire to receive for sake of sharing. I want to receive $1 million so that way I can take my friends on fabulous vacations. I can throw wonderful parties so I can give to my favorite charities. So the more that we expand our capacity to receive for the desire to receive for the sake of sharing, the more that, to your point of reciprocity, it's things just come and flow. I actually have a rule, and I don't ever expect anybody else to follow it, but if I ever buy something for myself, Fabienne, and it doesn't matter how much I love it. Like this actually happened one time at a wedding I was at in Minnesota. I had bought myself a gorgeous $700 yellow dress from one of my favorite brands, and I'm wearing it at the wedding. And one of the servers at the wedding, this lovely young woman who I'd never met before, said, "Oh, loved it. That dress is the most beautiful dress I've ever seen in my life." I said, "Oh, great. I have a suitcase. I'll go change and give it to you." And I just I am always willing to let go because I understand that things are only temporarily meant to be ours. And I'm a temporary custodian. Now, if my husband or a friend gives me a gift, of course, I'll cherish it and keep it. But if I buy something for myself, then I know I'm only temporarily meant to hold it until I'm meant to share it. And that's really how I feel about all of the connections and resources I cultivate, is they're only temporarily meant to be mine until I meet the right person that I'm meant to share them with.
I think it's right here on my altar in my office is the little prayer book you gave me.
Yes.
I can't read it, but you said just have it energetically. And I was like, I just met this woman 45 minutes ago and she's giving me a book from her handbag. Amazing. Amazing. I'm not sure if you've ever met Ivan Meisner, who is the founder of a Business Network International. BNI was one of the reasons that I was able to start my business and get more clients in the very beginning. And I met him recently and we've become friendly because we're part of the Transformational Leadership Council together. And he has this thing that he has said since day one that I joined BNI, which was givers gain.
Mm.
Givers gain. And I would like to hear more from you about this givers gain, law of reciprocity, law of circulation. What is your experience with that? And how, other than what you've already shared with us, how do you use that in your life? Does it come innately? Is it something you practice? Do it a few times a day? Just whatever you're willing to share.
Yeah, thank you. And I do remember BNI. That was one of the first networking groups I had ever joined when I was starting and building my first company. And it's all about giving and sharing connections and supporting one another. So for me, I really do want to acknowledge my parents on this part of it. My dad, when I was a little girl, my dad was a captain at the fire department. And in the United States, many people may be aware of a famous charitable thing called Toys for Tots, where firefighters would go around and deliver presents to those who couldn't afford presents. And I remember I used to get to ride on the fire truck, Fabienne, when I was a little girl, and to get to give presents and to have an appreciation, too, that not to take it for granted that I even got a present under the tree, let alone 4 or 5. And so that really cultivated in me this desire to be of service, desire to give. And further, I actually wrote a chapter in my first book called Getting More Than You Give. And it's so true. I find that anytime I give, I don't even worry about my own needs being met because I just always trust with perfect certainty that all of my needs are always met. And often people, when I was younger, I remember people were afraid of sharing friends of, oh, what if I share this friendship or share this client with you? Then I'll have less. That's really a mindset that I think hinders our ability to embrace our greatest capacity as human beings. When I was building my first company and even what we're doing right now with OptiMatch, in our first company, you would have competitors, right? Like there was this area of competitors.
Yeah.
I was BFFs with all of them. I sent them all referrals. They were all invited to my holiday parties, charity parties, anything I threw, and still friends with many of them to this day because to me, there was no lack. I'm not the right person for everybody, and I want everybody's needs to be met. And it continued when I read a book called Half the Sky by Nicholas Kristof and his wife, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, in about 2010.
Yeah.
Beautiful book about
I have chills just thinking about that book. Hard book to read, but so profound.
It changed my life. I read that book, and kudos to my ex-husband because he literally changed my life. Every night, Fabienne, I read that book. I would cry myself to sleep. I'm tearing up right now.
No,
just
me too. Me too.
as you know, if you haven't read the book, keep Kleenex next to you as you read it. And they talk about all of these atrocities happening in the world. And one of the quickest ways, according to the book and the research, to prevent these atrocities in the world is to build schools.
Yeah.
So after my ex-husband sees me crying myself to sleep every night, he says, "What is this junk you're reading? I'm going to go read it." So he reads it and he says, "Well, why don't we just take a portion of your proceeds? Because ever since I opened my first company, 10% of the proceeds of any business I have always go back to charity." He said, "Why don't we just start building schools with the money that we put aside from your company?" And I said, "That's genius." So first, we looked at building a school in Cambodia. That when I went out there around 2012, it was hard to know who to trust because at that time you're cutting a $35,000 check
Yeah.
to an unknown person or entity. And I really gave up on it. I went to Cambodia and I just didn't trust the children were going to get the money. So I gave up on that dream for about 5 years, and taking it back full circle to my favorite question, ask people, what matters to you? I was in a mastermind in I believe it was 2017. And we're sitting there in Monterey, California, and this young man is partnered with me in this breakout session. And the prompt we were asked to ask one another is, what matters to you?
Mm.
And the gentleman looks me in the eye and he asked me that question. And I said, building schools. He says, what are you doing about it? I said, I give up. It's too hard. I can't. How many of us have been there, right? Whether it's a business, a dream of some sort that we put off to the side because it's just too hard, whatever that means. And he says, cut that crap out, stand up and share that in front of the room. And there were about 100 thought leaders there. So I shared this. And a woman named Linda Burgess stood up and said, call Skylar at Build On Monday and you'll be sorted. And sure enough, I called Skylar, and about 4 months later, my ex-husband and my parents and I were building our first school in Nepal together, which was life-altering. And then my dad, who passed away last year, he and I had the honor, Fabienne, I'll just take my breath away, of getting to build a school together in Senegal. We spent a week together building the school with the local villagers. My dad got to talk to the chieftains. I got to talk to the local women. And it was so cute. One of the parts of building schools is you get to talk to the villagers and ask them about what it's like from their perspective. And in that particular village in Senegal, there was a predominantly Muslim culture. And two profound things happened there. One of the days, here I am, and we had funded the school, and I'm carrying huge, heavy, very heavy buckets of sand. And the women came up to me, and one of them said to me, what are you doing, woman? You already paid for the school. Why on earth are you carrying the sand? And the men are doing that. We can't do that. We're women. And I looked at them and I said, we are as powerful as the men are, and we can do anything they can do. And this is for your kids. So of course I'm going to do it. And one by one, Fabienne, the women lined up and formed a line. And they all started helping to build the school and said, thank you for teaching us that we can be equally as powerful as the men. And it was mind-blowing. And then later when we were doing the village talk, it was so cute because you just don't understand other cultures. We might look at other cultures and say, why would people have many wives? And they looked at me because in that culture, one man might have 7 or 8 wives. And the women said to me during our gender talks, they said, we don't understand. You are from America, right? I said, yes. And they said, you only have one wife to one husband. Yes. Well, who takes care of the babies? Who provides, who cleans the huts? Who tends to the farm? They're like, how do you only handle one wife? But I say all this to say that we would never have these experiences. We all have our own blinders and limiting perspectives that whatever it looks like for you to expand your capacity for sharing, it's going to touch other people's lives in ways that you'll never be able to imagine.
And it all started with what matters to you, and then the willingness to speak it for someone then to connect you. The same thing happened to me. I was working on a mind movie in 2008, August 2008. And one of the last slides in the mind movie, honestly, you would really appreciate this, Jen, because in the first part of the mind movie, I'm putting private jets and private this and, just all these big houses. And then it's as if the universe hijacked my mind movie. And in the end, I'm putting images of myself in what feels like Africa, building schools. And I don't know where this came in. I have no ties to Africa, nothing, it was just like, oh, okay. And Mother Teresa got in there somewhere. And I don't know, who do I think I am? And I just put the mind movie out there. Some of you who've been listening to this podcast saw that I have a mind movie interview. earlier, and you can go to YouTube and type in Fabienne Fredrickson Mind Movie, and you can see that exact episode where in the end there's these schools being built. And it all started with my friend Barry watching that Mind Movie and said, "Do you really want to build schools? Because I'm going to put you in touch with Cynthia Kersey of the Unstoppable Foundation." And then I went on to build several schools with Cynthia, and then going there myself and meeting the children and meeting the elders and meeting the teachers. And that was absolutely profound, life-changing situation. And I took my 10-year-old or 12-year-old daughter with me at the time. But it all started with somebody being willing to put us together. And what I'm hearing as we're discussing this, and as you're sharing your brilliance with us, is that everything can be solved with a connection.
Oh, yes. I love that. That is so brilliant, Fabienne.
And never would I, or perhaps even you, first going to Cambodia and it's not working. And me thinking, why is this in my mind movie? What is this? And all it took was one person who could really listen to what matters most to you and to me, and then trust their intuition and give us that resource, probably without attachment to whether we do anything about it. And then when it's aligned and we're aware, we're not being spiritually deaf, but really we're listening to the signs and the synchronicities and saying, this isn't here just by accident. Let's move. Let's go on this. Then, because would you say that you have no idea the real lasting, profound effect that building that school has had, and the one with your father?
No idea. None.
No idea. And when I went to meet the people, and hundreds of people are drumming and walking and dancing towards us and the Jeep that we had arrived in, I had no concept, and still today, no concept. And it all came from a connection. Speaking of connections that can change absolutely everything for your life, if you're listening and you're wondering how to grow your business while reclaiming your life, I'd love to invite you to a free, friendly, exploratory strategy call. This is a chance for us to listen deeply to what you're dealing with in your business right now, what's working, what's not working, where you'd like to be in, let's say, 2 to 3 years, and help you map out a plan of action, really for you to get a 2-year roadmap to get you to 7 figures, maybe beyond, with ease and freedom. There is no cost for this free strategy call. This is a conversation, a connection, if you will, just a space for us to connect and for you to get clarity. It is an opportunity for us to start our relationship. If you are interested in taking me up on this, just go to boldheart.com/call. boldheart.com/call. And I will also link this opportunity for a free strategy call in the show notes.
Beautifully put. Yeah, it's the power of connecting. And connecting, going back to the giving, not with the desire to get anything. It's not like, and that's where the transactional side, the old modality that we've all evolved from, this old top-down competing for resources, that's falling by the wayside. Now we're seeing sharing resources, sharing connection, sharing for the sake of sharing, expecting nothing in return, and yet having these exponentially beautiful impacts like ripples on a wave that are going out and impacting the furthest reaches of the world.
That feels like feminine leadership to me.
Yes.
Just nurturing, collaborative, non-competitive, and intuition-based.
Precisely. Yeah, that's it. And for what it's worth, I know that a lot of you out there are listening, and your intention is to be the most powerful, wonderful, incredible conscious leaders that you can be as women in the world. And I also invite us all, as much as connection to others matters, I call it the golden triangle of connection. There's connection to ourselves, which connection to others, which we were just talking about, but it's really connection to ourselves, that the more we cultivate that connection, that deep, deep, deep connection to ourselves, that allows for more meaningful connection to others and more meaningful connection to our purpose up here at the top, or to source, whatever you consider that for you. And I think that the more we're all going internal and connecting more deeply, then when we do give, it becomes true heart-focused giving, where we're really giving from a place of overflow, of that joyful abundance that is just expanding. It's cute. I work with HeartMath a lot for something called the Global Coherence Pulse that we do the third Saturday of every month. And a few months ago, we did with the head scientist from HeartMath, and Roland McCready is the guy behind a lot of the work that Dr. Joe Dispenza does. And HeartMath has come up with this new term, which is help love go viral.
Yeah.
And that's it. Let's all help love go viral. Let's help connections go viral. Let's help loving connections go viral.
I want to speak more about this connecting with self, because what I'm hearing, first of all, the helping love go viral, that's my jam. I was on the train 2 days ago coming back from Provence to Paris. And I don't know why, but I went and read the comments on this podcast, just like the general comments. And one of the last comments was like, oh my God, Fabienne is so generous. She's so this, she's so that. I had tears coming into my eyes thinking like, yeah, like for me, it's all about getting the love and just the permission to the feminine to be its most expressed self through making your own money and also having your most delicious life and really connecting with your purpose. I really am intrigued by that corner of the triangle that says connecting with self. How do you approach that? What does it look like? Please teach us.
So part of connection to self, I'm going to pull the thread back in from HeartMath and helping love go viral, and then we'll touch on inner child work. I'm neurodiverse. If anybody doesn't know what that means, it just means that your brain works in a non-typical sort of way. That could be inclusive of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, a myriad of different things. So about 7 years ago, I found out I was neurodiverse. And one of the things I often share with people is self-regulation is the key to connection to self and others. Whether you're neurodiverse like me, or whether you're somebody who's neurotypical, if we don't have the capacity to regulate our own nervous system, then our 4-year-old or our 3-year-old is the one who's having the conversations, who's sitting in the boardroom. I wrote an article about that a while ago, is that it's the inner child in the boardroom. Most of us are not regulating our own nervous systems. And so it's either our upset inner child, our upset 5-year-old that's having the discussions with our business partner, our romantic partner, our clients, our upset clients. And part of this, I love to tie in the science aspect of things, is related to the 3-brain system. So we have these 3 parts to our brain. Many of us are already familiar with the reptilian brain, or the amygdala, the lower part of the brain. Then you have the midbrain, which is like the mammalian brain. Are you safe? Are you like me? Can I trust you? And then you have the highest part of the brain, the neocortex, and our ability to be able to imagine things, to experience love, to have creative thought. But what most of us don't realize, Fabienne, is that the higher brain can't function until the lower brain feels safe. So that is where self-regulation comes in, and why I'm such a huge proponent of HeartMath's work around it. They've scientifically been studying this for 40 plus years. And all it looks like is spending time where, if you notice you're getting triggered, or even proactively, I do it every morning and throughout the day, just stopping, breathing slowly and deeply into the count of 5 and out to the count of 5 through the center of your heart or chest. And doing so helps us regain access to that prefrontal cortex, the neocortex, to our higher brain functions. So that way we're not reacting, we're responding. Now that ties into the second part of this equation, which is inner child work. I didn't know what this was until about 8 years ago. 2 girlfriends started to teach me at the same time, ironically, right before I was going through my divorce with my ex-husband. And it was life-changing. That the tenet of inner child work, Louise Hay was a huge proponent of this, is just to connect to a version of yourself. She could be any age. She could be 2 years old, 10 years old, 13, 5. It doesn't really matter. And you can either do this through looking at a picture of yourself at that age, or through imagining with your eyes shut whatever age you want to imagine yourself at. And then cultivating a relationship with yourself at that age every single day, Fabienne. I sit down as soon as I finish my meditation. I immediately go into heart focused breathing. And then the last step before I go into kind of talking out loud to my higher self and source is I'll put my right hand on my heart, my left hand on my womb or abdomen area, and I'll shut my eyes. Now, my inner child loves to be addressed as sweetheart. If you call her sweetie, it is DEFCON 4 and she will throw a tantrum. You have to find out how your inner child wants to be addressed. There is a very particular way, and it's different for everybody. One of my best friends who taught me this, her inner child is very precise in what she wants to wear and is very specific. Mine, I never pay attention to that. But I ask her every day, I say, sweetheart, how are you feeling today? What do you need? And the reason I found, Fabienne, that there's so much conflict in the world with men and women, I teach men this as well, is that we don't know what we need. And then we lash out at people in our lives, professionally, romantically, friendship-wise, because in some way we're not getting our needs met. And yet, because we're unaware of it, we're grasping at straws and trying to take energy where we can. So what I love about this practice is, like a couple of days ago, my inner child was quite sad. And sometimes I'm surprised. Sometimes I'm aware and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty pissed or sad about that. But sometimes I'll be like, oh, sweetheart, how are you feeling today? I'm really sad and hurt. And I'm like, uh-oh, what are we sad and hurt about? I just didn't know it. And by addressing it and acknowledging, oh, you have every right to feel hurt and sad. Tell me, where does it hurt? What do you need? What would you need today? Yesterday, I wasn't feeling particularly great. And my inner child is like, what do you need? And she said, chocolate mousse. And I hear my husband laughing in the background because he sometimes sits in the living room while I meditate or do this practice. And she says, I want chocolate mousse. And I'm like, oh God, you're not feeling great and chocolate mousse is last. I was like, sweetheart, I don't know if we can have chocolate. And then you can tell it's about to be a tantrum. I'm like, oh, wait. I forgot one of my teachers taught me I could give her metaphysical chocolate mousse. So I was like, okay, sweetheart, it doesn't always have to mean that you have to go to the fridge and get real ice cream. I was like, oh, you want chocolate mousse? You want sprinkles and whipped cream? And then you build this imaginary sundae or chocolate mousse. And reconnecting to yourself. I used to be so embarrassed and shy. I was made fun of, Fabienne. I was a cheerleader for a year when I was in high school. And I very vividly remember our cheerleading coach saying, we are only as good as our weakest link, which is Jennifer.
Wow.
And so I felt so embarrassed and ashamed about how uncoordinated I was for many years. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, when I started doing inner child work, she loves to dance, Fabienne. There is nothing she enjoys more. And so now it's one of my greatest joys. I never miss a day of dancing because it brings her happiness and it's helped me to connect to that joyful side of myself that I had suppressed for many years.
Gosh, everything you're saying is like, oh, me too. I was bullied, and me too. I feel like I need to self-regulate sometimes. And I didn't get on the cheerleading squad because I guess I wasn't coordinated, but I love to dance. It's like we've lived parallel lives. I'm really happy that you're bringing this up because I didn't find out about this self-regulation thing until about a year ago. I guess it's maybe I wasn't aware of it or it's being talked about more and more. But breathing and being okay with yourself makes you a better connector because you're more at ease with yourself and you're not being triggered as much. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
100%. And to go back to the HeartMath technique, what I love about it is, let me tell you, in 2024, I hit DEFCON 4 many times. And the only way I de-escalated that is I love HeartMath because, obviously you can meditate, but nobody's going to be like, excuse me, in the middle of a meeting while you sit down and quietly shut your eyes. That's not going to be acceptable in any boardroom or meeting.
Yeah.
So there were a handful of times last year where something happened. We don't have to get into the details. It's irrelevant. And all of a sudden you could fry an egg on my head. I was so angry. And by having the awareness, though, and having these tools, I even coach clients on this, to have an emergency tool list, like having those tools, have it on your screensaver on your phone, have a little sticky note on your computer that says heart focused breathing, that says feel the bottoms of your feet, whatever it is to help ground yourself in that moment. So during those times where I started to notice I was getting triggered, I would do the slow, deep breathing with my eyes open. And instead of having these things blow up into things that could have been really not good for myself or for others, I want to say not good. I don't like to judge things as good or bad, but it could have had repercussions for myself or others, that instead I was able to handle them 95% of the time with grace and ease and mutual respect that wound up leading to outcomes that everybody was happy with.
Would you be willing to share a couple more of the things that you would have on your list? I'm personally curious. I found myself being in a meeting a few months ago, and I felt really like I didn't belong. And I noticed getting anxious. And so I just put my hands together like this, not knowing why. And somehow that just regulated everything. I don't know what the science is behind it, but tell me more about like focusing on the bottom of your soles and whatever it is that worked for you. Because I know that if I'm thinking about, oh, I wonder what else she's had, I know our listeners are thinking as well.
Yeah, I have 187 tools I use
Wow.
at any given time for myself and for others. So it's funny that you did the steepling of the hands. So if you're listening to the podcast, I encourage you to go find the video so you can see what Fabienne was just doing with steepling of the hands. If you're on a Zoom meeting, a really cool one that's tied into this one as well, it's a neuroscience one. You cross your right hand on top of your left, clasp your fingers together and pull. And if you notice, I'm going to drop this below the camera line. Nobody knows. And cross one ankle over the other. It automatically calms your nervous system. And puts you in a super learning state. So that's a really fun one. Another one that I've learned too is you can actually do anything with your hands that you've never done before. When we're getting triggered, our body goes into physiological states that are the same. Like if you've ever seen this before or noticed it in yourself, when your husband or your best friend or your business partner gets upset, we hold our body in the same way. We might cross our arms, we might ball our fists. So another thing, this was a technique I learned years ago in a mastermind, was jellyfish. Like you cross both your wrists together and you could do this again. And doing anything that your body's not used to gives you access to new ways of thinking, being, and acting. Another one of my favorites that I take myself through, well, there's two more, so many, so I will give them. Another one of my favorite tools is Paradoxical Thinking by Viktor Frankl, Logotherapy. So if you've ever read prolific book, again, very sad but beautiful, A Man's Search for Meaning, about how he survives Auschwitz. After he comes out of Auschwitz, he creates this thing called logotherapy. And he gives an example in the story of one of his patients who is so embarrassed because he always sweats, right? He gets so nervous every time he goes out that he's sweating profusely. So the idea of paradoxical thinking is you drop all resistance, which is actually going to tie into the next tool I'll give you. You drop all resistance. So instead of saying, this was what he suggested to his client in the book, instead of saying, oh God, don't let me sweat, don't let me sweat. How many times do we think that? Don't let me get angry, don't let me get angry, you know? Instead, you would say to yourself, oh, I hope I sweat so much. I sweat buckets. I hope people need to follow me around with a mop and and a towel. And his client stopped sweating. Same thing with insomnia. Oh, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. 9 times out of 10, I find this works. If I wake up in the middle of the night, my brain's racing, I'll say, I hope I never fall back asleep again. I hope I stay awake for the next 100 years. And by dropping the resistance to whatever it is, freedom opens up. And on that note, there's another one called the Sedona method by, I think it's Hale Dwoskin. And that's one that I'll take myself through. I can use it for sleep or for other things. You ask yourself these 5 questions. Could I simply welcome that my business partner is absent? Could I simply allow that my business partner is absent? Could I release that my business partner is absent for this important meeting? Would I release that my business partner is absent for this meeting? When will I release? And every time you go through it, you can either have a partner or a coach take you through it, or I take myself through it often. You just say, could you simply welcome? Could you allow? Could you release? Would you release? When will you release? And normally if you take yourself through that 5, 10, 15 times, all resistance has dropped, because most of our anger and upsets in life, Fabienne, is related to resistance to something happening to a person or a situation.
Fascinating. I am definitely going to listen to this again. Thank you for sharing that, even though it's not necessarily a part of the connection topic. And
It is absolutely, for what it's worth, because that's what stops us from connecting. Our own fears, insecurities, doubts, resistance. Resistance is such a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, Fabienne. Resistance is one of the key things that stops us from connecting.
It's funny that you should say that, because this morning I was journaling about resistance and looking for, I teach resistance, but I'm experiencing it in my life. I'm always very vulnerable and transparent about what I'm working on this podcast, because I like to hear what people are really working on. I was journaling on resistance and saying, I would love some tools to overcome that. And you just provided them. Thank you, universe. Thank you very much. Tell us about connection to our purpose as the final triangle piece.
What I found, Fabienne, is the more that we quiet that amygdala and the fears and the insecurities and the doubts, the more we connect to our inner self, our higher self through meditation, the more we cultivate meaningful relationships, all of a sudden our purpose begins to get more clear. What normally happens to those of us who are not connected to ourselves or others, our purpose, is that we're being guided by social media, by different things out there, by all of these stimuli telling us what we should do, where we should be, what we shouldn't do, what we should wear, what we shouldn't wear. What I found is the more we quiet that amygdala, the more we connect to that creativity, that imagination, that infinite possibilities that are available, then all of a sudden we can begin to hear that still, quiet, soft voice. As you know, I know this is all of your work, that comes from our heart. And that's when I'm working with coaching clients or helping people with this, what I explain is that our should and should not voice, mine is called juicy, to be very clear, punish. She was designed for at 5 years old to be sure people are punished and put in their place. When you hear that loud voice on the megaphone in your head, you suck, you're stupid, this person is stupid, this isn't fair, that's not our higher self. That's when it's on the loud phone or, speakerphone. That's often our ego. It's designed to protect us and keep us safe. Nothing wrong with that. When we learn to quiet that heart-focused breathing, meditation, inner child work, take your pick of any of these tools, then all of a sudden, the still, soft, quiet whisper of our soul, our higher self, our source, that begins to echo from our heart and become loud enough that we can hear it and begin to take action on it. Though often we'll wind up dating the wrong person, marrying the wrong person, taking the wrong job offer, taking the wrong clients on because we're not connected to that. So I have found personally that the more we connect deeply to ourselves, the more the others we connect with are aligned with us, which then brings us into greater harmony with understanding and aligning with our purpose.
When you've got all three, what happens, Jen?
You become joyfully abundant, blissful, and a beacon of light for those around you. And you get to live a life you love. And that would be my gift and my wish for you, for all of your listeners, for anybody out there tuning in. From the bottom of my heart, I wish you a joyful life filled with miracles that you recognize and appreciate and deep connection to yourself, others, and your purpose.
That brings tears to my eyes. It's so beautiful the way you phrased it.
Thank you.
I want to hear more about HeartMath, please.
Thank you. So if anybody wants to try it, it's om.app/survey. And I've made it my work to study human connection. And that's what it's all about, is how do we connect with others and why don't we connect? Why is it sometimes, Fabienne, we get on a call and through no fault of our own, it just seems like the other person is grating nails on the chalkboard. So it turns out what I've learned from studying this for most of my life is it's motivators. If my motivators and your motivators align, we're going to feel natural affinity and psychological safety. Like I feel if you were to answer, or you might have even answered it before, you and I would probably be very closely aligned on our motivators because it allows us to drop in. Now, does it mean that if you have different motivators than somebody, that you can't get along? No, you might be able to become friends. There could be chemistry. I've seen it happen. We did not design it for dating. 70% of happy couples do match perfectly according to our algorithm, though 30% do match oppositely, which we, of course, is that old adage, opposites attract, because that creates chemistry and friction. So I say all of this to say that what we really want to do is reverse these accidental adversarial relationships. So we created this algorithm that tells you how you're motivated and how somebody else is motivated. We work with communities who want to intermatch their members and create greater retention and engagement. We work with corporations. I just did a consultancy for a company of 500 people for their 35 leadership team members. And we analyzed everybody from the C-suite down to the managers, and it was astounding, the results. They're a really cohesive team already, but everybody was within 5 to 7 points for the most part, except for 1 or 2 outliers of the CEO, which we often see. The leadership team impacts everybody else. And so what we're doing is working on reversing the accidental adversarial relationship between ourselves and others. And how that looks is, let's say that our motivators are divergent from each other. Well, wouldn't that be helpful to know? Like one of our service providers one day I'm not going to lie, I was getting triggered on several occasions. And I said, "Oh, would you mind answering our matching questions?" And I had a feeling we call it lychee, apple, mango, pear. Lychees are motivated by achievement, apples are motivated by information, mangoes are motivated by fun, and pears are motivated by other people's needs. I had a feeling he was a high apple. So 40 is the highest score you could get. And at the end of this call, he told me no 3 times. I was like, "Oh, did you send?" No. "Well, do you mind if I call this person?" No. And I'm starting to notice I'm getting triggered. So I get off the call with him, and then I remembered he answered our matching questions because I'd asked him to. And the moment I saw his numbers, Fabienne, that he was a 37 apple, which is 3 points below the highest you could get, I realized that I was responding to his motivators, not to him. He's just motivated differently, and I was able to drop into immediate compassion. So that's actually why we call it the fruits, is it's that old adage, like sometimes one person's speaking apple and another is speaking orange, and you literally can't hear each other.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Can't wait. We'll put the link in the show notes. You're saying this is free. My listeners.
Anybody can go to om.app/survey, and you can find out for free how you are motivated. And it gives you a lovely report. It tells you it. And eventually we'll have a functionality, because everybody always says, like, I just had this husband and wife and a friend, and they were all staying together over Christmas and New Year's. And it was so cute. All of their motivators were within like 5 to 7 points of each other. So it's like, eventually we'll have ways that you can find out how you and family and friends can motivate. So stay tuned on that.
Okay. My goodness. Thank you. I will go and do that. And I advise everyone to take Jen up on her gift. Thank you for this delicious time, valuable time with us today. Do you have any parting words based on everything we've talked about that you would like us to just hold in our hearts when it comes to connecting and creating our most delicious life?
Your most delicious life starts with you. Fall in love with yourself, cherish yourself, respect and admire yourself, and everyone who comes into your life will be a reflection of your relationship with yourself.
That is profound. Thank you, Jen, so much for your generosity and your kindness. Sending you lots of love. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll go check out Jen's offer and just let's go back and listen to this again because it is so rich. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.